Have you ever heard the phrase, it's easy to hide behind a microphone? I mean, you could, well, you'd have to have a bigger microphone actually. Maybe if you had a microphone with a pop filter on it, you could actually hide behind a microphone with a pop filter and nobody could see your face at all. Well, you could do that. It's not a good idea. It's also horrible for leadership communication skills, but there are a lot of people who do it. They've completely lost the ability to communicate in person. They've lost the ability to tell an entertaining story. They've lost the ability to read other people's body language. They've lost the ability to listen for the intonation. The only conversation they can have is on Zoom, where two faces are next to each other side by side, and they can kind of see each other in the little window in the corner or on the other screen, but the ability to really get the vibe, I think, is a little bit different when you're face to face. And that is a leadership skill, a communication skill that good leaders need to master. And as digital world continues to invade human relationships, it will become a rare skill set that not everybody possesses. That's what I want to talk about today on Leading Leaders. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders podcast, and like my illustration with the little mic and the pop filter, it's really easy to hide behind the screen. Now, in some ways, that's like behind the keyboard and the Twitter screen, and you can say anything you want to on Twitter as long as you don't get doxxed, because nobody knows where you live, because they're not going to come confront you face to face, right? It's like the bully in the schoolyard yelling things over the fence at you. As long as you're on that side of the fence and he's on this side, everything's good. But that's been the tactic of bullies for centuries. They want to harangue you, they want to harass you, they want to push you around, they want to make fun of you, they want to call you names from a distance. They don't want you to get up in their face, and they don't want to get up in your face. They just want to say their piece as long as it's from way over there, and there's protection, if you will, that great divide. But see, the other thing they can do is they can make it seem like the only conversation going on is what they have to say. The only information that's true and accurate and important is what they have to say, and that everything else is diminished. If there's only one set of voices, it's really hard to tell whether they're telling the truth or not. See, when you're face to face and there's a group of people, a group of humans gathering, when humans gather, you don't just see the face that's in front of you. You don't just hear the voice that's talking. No, you can kind of peek over their shoulder and see the facial expressions of everyone else. Yeah, you kind of get to read the room, so to speak. You get to feel out what everybody else is responding to. The digital world kind of gives us a hard time with that. It's really easy to just kind of project all the success, all the advice, all the wisdom, all the knowledge you want, and there's no feedback. Even in the speaker world, even in the training world, there are a whole lot of people who prefer to go virtual. They can stand around in their boxer shorts as long as they put a coat on. You don't have any idea what the rest of me looks like today. You have no idea what's going on in my world or how much stuff is around me. I had a coaching client just this last week that she's working on putting together some new videos for her own stuff. And she said, I like the way your setup is done. Can you tell me a little bit about it? So I literally plugged in a camera to an extra channel, and I showed her everything around me. You would be astounded if you had an idea what the backside of this set looks like on a daily basis. It's not really relevant to the content that I teach, but it's relevant if you think that, kind of like the television, and kids used to think the people lived inside that box, like the television set where you see the prim and proper perfected look, the filtered look, the enhanced look right in front of the camera, but just off screen is something entirely different. About half the time, right down here is my giant fur ball, Sandy, the Irish doodle, the giant mass of fur that loves to chew on squeaky toys while laying at my feet. And sometimes she's running back and forth behind me because my studio is in my home. But see, if we were engaged as humans gathering, you would be aware of all of the distractions and everything going on around me, and not just the face that I put forward. Now, why do I bring this up? The There's a big battle right now raging for a particular platform of communication, and this particular platform of communication is a global platform of communication. And unbeknownst to a lot of people, the window of observation of reality has been narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed over maybe the last 5 years. What we thought was open, transparent communication among people globally where everybody had a chance to express their views and share their ideas. Turns out that's not the case. In fact, there are a whole lot of people whose voices have been expressed, but somebody hit the mute button while they were talking. You want to know what that sounds like? You want to know what that feels like? It feels like this. It's like if I were to reach up here while talking to you, on the mute button. Now see, if I were yelling vehemently that the place is on fire, that there's a big problem, that our world is in trouble, and yet somebody had their finger on the mute button for me, then what I have to communicate to you is irrelevant. The minute we become humans gathering, though, face to face, somebody may try to muzzle me, somebody may try to silence me, but all the world gets to see that. All the world gets to see when one person is trying to hush you up. Maybe they drag you out with a shepherd's hook like they used to do in the old days on the theater stage. Maybe they sweep you off into a car with a bag over your head like they did in the days of the Cold War. Maybe they cut your tongue out like they do in countries where the drug cartels run the land. See, there's a whole lot of ways to silence somebody. And sometimes it just looks like it's not, because you only hear. You don't get to hear what they don't want you to hear. And see, that's happening in digital platforms across the world right now. It's not just the one, it's many. But I say all that to say, if you're a leader at any level, the leadership communication skill set necessary to talk face to people, to communicate your heart, your thoughts, your emotions, your ideas, that is an absolutely critical tool. I have an interview today. I'm not sure if we're going to live stream it or not. That'll depend on whether or not me and this little piece of technology actually work things out, because we've had a heck of a morning this morning trying to live stream wirelessly just to make sure that it works before I take my mobile studio on the road. We did not play well together, so I'm streaming from the studio today because of that. But if I work that out, I will live stream this interview. Now, this is an individual who was one of the first biologically female coaches of major sports in the United States. She was also born in another country, so she's a first-generation American immigrant. She's also a teacher. She's also a leader. And even today, in the 8th decade of her life, she still works with kids, teaches kids, and coaches soccer. Yeah, true story. I want to talk to her about what it's like, because do you know what they've asked her to do at her local community event center? Tell stories. Why would you want somebody to tell stories? Because telling stories is that way of leadership communication when humans gather. When we take all the filters out, when we don't try to hide our face, when we look just as natural and real as we are, when we sit down face to face and we can be poked in the eye or kicked in the shin if what we say is inappropriate or offensive or hurtful. When we have to deal with the reality and you can't be a keyboard warrior or hide behind your microphone and say whatever stupid stuff you want to. When you've got to deal with the consequences of the words that come out of your mouth, the ideas in your head, and the emotions in your heart, that's when the world changes. That's how we learned as kids to play together. It's how we learned to share. Unfortunately, in some places, it's also how we learned about things that we shouldn't have known anything about. When we saw our first drug deal, our first sexual encounter, our first act of violence, our first expression of racism. And those, sadly, are cultivated cultural problems. Humans naturally gravitate toward each other until you tell them not to. But the ability to communicate as a leader, face to face, in a small group, to tell a story that captivates people's attention. Hopefully, it has truth to it. It's not just a fairy tale. But the ability to communicate that way, that is becoming a dying art. The metaverse, the manipulation of all things digital, the hiding of our faces, not only behind the keyboard, but behind filters. And it fascinates me when I see some of these filters and people turn them on and they're like, if you know what I really look like, you realize what you see right now is not me. Well, we're reaching a point where you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have a clue. And sometimes there are deep fakes that look and sound just like the person you thought it was, but it really isn't them. It's some catfish mimicking them. Again, when humans gather, that's really hard to do. When humans gather, you've got to be able to communicate well. You've got to be able to read people well. You've got to be able to project yourself well, not just vocally, not just with the words coming out of your mouth, but with your facial expressions. The ability to read the room and pace yourself to who they are, to show the dignity, to show the class, to show the respect that they deserve, but also to be down to earth and genuine with whoever is in front of you. That ability to be a communicative chameleon, that's a dying art. Most of those people have been promoted to Hollywood, but some of the better communicators, some of the better leaders are just emerging with the ability to do that, to move from audience to audience, from crowd to crowd, face to face, in a gathering where people can see you and kick you in the shins if they need to. That communication form is becoming very rare. But if you have it, cultivate it. And if you don't have it, get it. Get to the Story Power Masterclass so you can learn how to communicate stories in a short format. Stop hiding behind the microphone, the pop filter, the keyboard, whatever it is that you're hiding behind. Move yourself into a place where you're having real human relationships. Face to face, eye to eye, knee to knee, toe to toe, whatever you need to do. But get into a place, whatever small group. I don't care if it's a Toastmasters group or a small group from your church or a community of old people that sit around and drink coffee at the coffee shop. Get face to face with humans and begin to communicate. Because if there's a sun flare and an EMP shuts down all electronics, all of the digital facade will instantly evaporate and you'll be right back to where we were a century or so ago. Face-to-face communication will be required. And if you haven't mastered it, you're going to regret it. That's my fair warning. Now's the time. Learn to communicate first face-to-face where humans gather. Leadership communication when humans gather is a dying art and it needs to be rediscovered. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.